Hi there, I'm Wendy McCallum, burnout and alcohol coach and wellness expert, and you're listening to Bite Size Balance, where everyday extraordinary women share their stories, expertise, and wisdom, all in the name of lifting each other up and creating a better life by design. Whether it's wellness, career, relationships, food, alcohol, mindfulness, hormones, or parenting, we talk about all things women's balance. If your life looks great on paper, but it still feels like something's missing, you're in the right place. Welcome to Bite Size Balance.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bite Size Balance. Got a kind of a cool episode today, I think, for you, in that I'm actually not hosting this one. I have asked my friend and fellow This Naked Mind coach, Christy Osborne, to come in and kind of take the reins on this episode because I'm going to be celebrating my 5-year alcohol-free anniversary. Just a couple days before this episode airs. Today, when we're recording this, January 6th, so I'm like, I can't do math. I'm 8 days away from my 5-year date, and I've forgotten it in the past, but this year felt like, it just felt like a big one. It felt like one that I should really celebrate. Honestly, one of the gifts of, which we're going to talk about, I'm sure, but one of the gifts of all of this for me is that I just don't think about alcohol or the fact that I don't drink very much. But I think it is important to mark and celebrate milestones like this. And so I wanted to do that, but I didn't want to just come on here and like blabber on by myself for, 45 minutes. So wanted someone to help guide me through the whole thing and ask me curious questions about this.
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly what Christy's going to ask me, and I'm going to hand it over to her. So hi, Christy.
Hey, babe, how are you? I'm so excited to be here. Congratulations.
Thank you.
5 years.
I am excited to be here too. And for those of you who don't know Christy was a guest on my podcast. I don't know when that aired, Christy, maybe a few months ago. And Christy is in London, England, but is originally from, where are you from in the States? California?
LA. Yeah.
LA.
Mm-hmm.
Originally from LA and lives in London and has a really great coaching practice going over there. You coach women all over the place like I do though, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
A lot in the States, a lot here, but it's pretty, yeah.
And she has a really awesome Instagram page. If you're on Instagram, it's, tell people what it is, Christy.
Love Life Sober with Christy.
Life Sober with Christy. And she also has some like super exciting stuff happening on the side. I don't know if you can talk about that. Can you talk about that on this podcast, or do we have to keep it secret?
Well, I mean, this is your celebration episode, but yeah, I just signed my book. I just signed my book deal this morning.
You just got a book deal this morning, you guys. So exciting. I'm so excited for her.
Double celebration. I'm
Woo-hoo!
So excited. Yeah.
And what's kind of cool is that there's a connection between the book, Christy getting the book deal, and Christy being on my podcast a few months ago, in that someone who was listening to the podcast, who's a client of mine, talked to Christy afterwards and said, "Oh, I think I might be able to help you find an agent," right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And anyway, so cool. It all worked out. It's awesome. It's awesome. Congratulations on that.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
That's enough. I'm now handing the reins over to you, Christy. You're running the show.
Well, again, congratulations. Like 5 years is so big. And I feel like pre my personal drinking days, if I would have thought of 5 years being alcohol free, would have thought A, that was impossible.
Yeah, me too.
And B, it was torture, right? But like, how did you tell me a little bit about like how you wound up deciding to stop? Like, what was the final straw, and like what got you to the point of just enough is enough?
Oh my gosh. One of the problems with being 5 years alcohol free is that it was 5 years ago. So, and also I'm in menopause, as everyone listening to this podcast knows, and my memory is less than amazing. But what I don't think I'll ever forget is how awful I felt about myself, especially in the like 2 to 3 years before I decided to take my first mindful break from alcohol. So I had taken lots of breaks from alcohol, trying to do sober Octobers or dry Januaries or like cleanses and all of that stuff. But I had never taken a truly mindful, kind of curious break from alcohol, like the type of break that you and I help women take. And so I hadn't done that. And before that, when I was trying basically just to prove to myself that I wasn't an alcoholic and I didn't have a problem by taking breaks successfully most of the time, not successfully. But taking those breaks, my life was really, really miserable. It was just miserable. And I don't think I'll ever forget that. And I think that's a good thing, to stay connected to that. And just to be so grateful for the fact that I'm not there anymore. I did not have, like a last straw moment. There was no rock bottom moment for me.
Yeah.
I had an awful lot of what I refer to as high bottoms, that now I look back on them and I think, why was that not enough? Like that should have qualified as a rock bottom. That should have been something that caused you to like change things. But I was stuck in that place that I think a lot of women are stuck in, where I was looking around all the time at what other people were doing. And it felt like what I was doing wasn't that bad. It wasn't that out of the ordinary. And, I had a lot of friends who, obviously I still have lots of friends who drink, but I had a lot of friends who drank like me. And I, for that reason, just never crossed my mind ever, like you said, that I would ever stop drinking, like that I would be at 5 years now, alcohol free is just not even on my radar at that point in time. But what was happening is I was getting increasingly anxious about the amount I was drinking. And now I can see it as anxiety. At the time, I wouldn't have labeled it as that, but really there was a great deal of anxiety around it where I couldn't turn off my thoughts around my own drinking. So I guess maybe alcohol helped me to do that, to be honest, which is so crazy, right? Like I was drinking so that I wouldn't have to think about how anxious I was about the fact that I was drinking. But especially in the middle of the night, that was for me. I guess if there was a last straw, it was like a big hay bale because I let it go on for a long time. But like those like middle of the night wakings almost every single night, the nights that I had drank, which was pretty much every night, honestly, in the last year, even if it was just a couple glasses of wine, I would be so hard on myself and couldn't get back to sleep. It would lead to all kinds of other crazy thoughts about other parts of my life. And the last 6 months to a year, I was regularly getting up in the middle of the night and going downstairs and usually I'd have a cup of chamomile tea. And then I would often like turn on my laptop and start Googling, how do I moderate? I'd look for places to take a break from alcohol. I do the Am I an Alcoholic questionnaire and fail every time. Which I think is important to highlight because a lot of people, we don't use the word alcoholic anymore. It's not a word I use in my practice. I don't care whether people identify as alcoholics or not. If it serves you, that's fine. But for me, it was just, it was basically a barrier to dealing with the problem because I never met that test. And therefore in my mind, it wasn't a bad enough problem for me to make any change around, which is such a crazy way to think about something that's obviously not doing you any favors anymore. Like we don't wait for rock bottoms in other areas of our life, right? We don't. Sometimes we do, but a lot of the time we don't. We just say, well, this isn't good enough, or I'd like to feel better in this area of my life. So I'm going to focus some efforts on that. But with alcohol, we don't. And that's because it feels so shameful to a lot of us to not drink, which is equally bonkers, right? That it feels crazy. So I think for me, it was really that building anxiety, and it was happening every single night. And I would, eventually go back to bed. I'd wake up exhausted because I'd been up in the middle of the night and because I've been drinking with kind of like, the low level sort of brain foggy, mild headache, just generally feeling crappy. And I just felt horrible about myself. I just was like talking to myself in a very awful way all of the time. Also, it didn't feel authentic to be coaching women around wellness when I had this like kind of thing that was happening to me, and I wasn't really talking about it with anyone else. And so I guess that was my like bag of rocks as opposed to a rock bottom. It was just like all these little things that just eventually got so heavy for me that I remember 5 years ago in December, Christmas was over and I was sitting in a chair it was still the holidays, and so I wasn't working, and I was sitting in a chair, and everyone was busy doing other things in my house, and there were like white lights in the window, and the tree was still up, and I was sitting in this like kind of cozy little nook in our house in a chair with a new book that I'd gotten for Christmas and a glass of red wine in my hand. And I don't know whether the voice, I mean, I'm assuming it was my voice. I like to think it was sort of my inner, like real authentic self. But I had this moment where I heard myself thinking, you don't even like this anymore.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing, Christy, is that I kept drinking after that. I just kept drinking. I probably drank the rest of the bottle that night because I was on holiday. Right. And, but it started like, that's when I really started thinking, maybe I need to be thinking about this more. Like maybe I need to be directing some more energy towards this, because it's obviously not, it's not making me feel good anymore. So that's really what led to me finally taking a break. I think what happened, I can't even remember the details of this. I was just coaching a group right before this, and I was saying to them, like, nobody ever knows when it's their last day one, you know. That's definitely the case for me, because I can't really remember what had led to me not having had a drink for 4 days. But I'm guessing I went to a party and drank too much and decided to, you know, I was doing these like self-imposed wine fasts that would last for like 2 days. I would hope they last for longer. And so I was on a self-imposed wine fast, and it had been 4 days since I'd had a drink, and I had to drive to get a medical test done. I had to drive like 4 hours to get to the place to get this test done. And I downloaded an audiobook for the first time in my life. I'd never downloaded an audiobook. And I just stumbled across This Naked Mind. And the byline for This Naked Mind is something like, control alcohol, like don't lose your life kind of thing. It was like, it sounded positive. It was like, ooh, I can control alcohol. That sounds great. And I remember saying to my husband, and I don't know why I told him this, but I remember saying, I think I'm going to download this book about not drinking. He was like, okay, go ahead. And it, you know, I downloaded it and I listened to it all the way there, and I was getting an MRI, and I was lying in the tube, and I was just thinking, oh, I got to get back to the car. I got to listen to the rest of that. And it just had a really, really big impact on me. I listened to the whole book that day and signed up for the free alcohol experiment the next day and started doing that all on my own. So no one knew I was doing this. I wasn't talking to anybody else about this. I had no partner in my dry January, which is basically what it turned into. I didn't have anybody I was doing it with. And I mean, there's so much more to the story, but basically that's the last time I had a drink. So
I love that. I mean, it's so funny, right? That all of our stories as women have so many similarities. I mean, I remember the late night Googling so well. I remember the late night Googling. And for me, it was like trying to find like some sort of like fancy rehab in the Cotswolds, because I was like, that sounds like amazing just to get a break. Which is what I really probably needed too, right? Was just a break. But then your mind just thinks exactly how you said it. Like, do I even qualify for this? Like, am I even quote unquote that bad? Like everybody around me is doing it. So it's just, you get stuck in that. Everybody around me is doing it, so mine must not be that bad, while you're feeling terrible.
Right. And one of the things I was thinking about today, actually, because I knew we were recording this, I was just thinking how much time I spent thinking about other people's drinking.
Yeah.
Like that in itself should have been an indication that this had become problematic for me, right? The amount of time that I spent, like I would never not know how much other people had had. If I was out for a dinner, I'd be watching what other people were doing. I would, I could list off sort of the 5 women who were likely to drink more than me. I always had that information on hand, but like that is disordered. The fact that I'm showing up for social events and looking for proof I'm not that bad. I mean, that in itself should have been enough. But anyway, there's so many patterns.
Yeah, I relate to that too. And it's like, if you don't have someone in the group that's as a big a drinker as you, it's like you get nervous that you're going to be the one.
Yeah. And you're actually moderating your drinking in that situation so that you don't become that one. I did that on many
occasions. Is torture.
Yeah. It's not fun. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I don't even know this. So tell me how you then transitioned from like all of your awesome wellness coaching to like, how long did it take to when you like stopped drinking, got trained up, and like, what was that transition like? Because I don't even actually know that and I want to know.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I was probably like 6 months alcohol free, following all of this naked mind stuff, which there wasn't as much of then. That was 5 years ago. So there just wasn't as much of it online and stuff. And I was, I sent my first email probably about 6 months into this naked mind, asking them if they were going to create a certification program.
Oh yeah. Cool.
Because I was already coaching, and I said, look, this is something that I have so many clients who would benefit from this. I think it's an amazing model for change. I'm already using these concepts in my coaching practice, but I would love to have formal training on it and get certified through you. And I just kept badgering them. And I now know that there were a bunch of us who were doing the same thing. And eventually, like as soon as I got the offer to apply for a certification program, when they started the certification, I did. And I went back and forth on it because I had a really busy practice. I had been coaching already for probably, I don't know how many years by then, maybe 8-9 years by that point. And I didn't need it. And it's an investment in time, an investment in money. And I went back and forth. And I had a call with a really good friend of mine who knows my business pretty well. And she says, she also runs her own business. And I said, oh, I don't know, Julie, like, is this worth it? Am I gonna, it's expensive. It's a lot of time. It's all of this. And she said, how are you going to feel about this 6 months from now when all those coaches get certified and you weren't part of that? Are you going to regret it? And I knew immediately, like the answer was so clear to me. And so I signed up that day and got certified. And then in terms of the integration or the transition, I mean, it happened very gradually because I was coaching using this naked mind tools and tactics and the philosophy before I got certified. But I wasn't coaching anyone directly around alcohol as their primary coping mechanism. So for years, I'd been coaching women around stress and burnout and trying to create better balance for themselves and more resonant lives. And part of that for many of them was changing their relationship with different substances. A lot of the time it was food, because of course I have the background in food. That was kind of where I started as a coach. So it was a slow transition, but I was really excited. I think I was the first person in my class to get certified. I was like, let's get this done so I can get going, and started coaching right away, right out of the gate around alcohol. And I would say within 3 months, it was 80% of my practice, which was really exciting because I really love coaching in this area. So it was a transition, but then I was really just waiting to get certified to start letting people know this is what I do now. Yeah.
I love that so much. And I relate so much in that, finding the freedom and then wanting to help other women, other people. And I remember my first like training session for my cohort, and my biggest energy snag, so to speak, was like, I don't have enough days under my belt. But then it was just like, this is the testament to how this methodology and what we coach is, right? Is because you find the freedom and you just know.
100%,
and it's hard to explain to someone that doesn't get that, but it's not about the years. I mean, 5 years is amazing, but you were ready and you were free, like, so much sooner to help others. And like, what do you think, like, tell me more about that kind of like, did you have that energy snag too at all? Or is that just me?
Well, because I had to wait for the certification class, because there was no training program. When I was emailing them, they're like, we don't have this, but people are asking us for this. So we might do this. I don't know. We'll let you know if we do, kind of thing. And then they ran a beta program, which I didn't get invited to or get notified of. And I don't know like why that was. I'd definitely been asking them before that. But as soon as I found out they were running a beta, I was on them. I'm like, look, I wanted to be in the beta. Please make sure I know about the next certification. So I had to wait for a while. So I think when I got certified, I was already 2 years alcohol free when that started. But yes, I definitely had that. I definitely had an element of like, who am I to coach in this area? I'm only 2 years sober, and I'm putting that in air quotes because it's not a word I use very often, but most people know what that means. But it's exactly what you're saying. It's like, it's the reason why I forgot last year. I forgot my 4-year anniversary. Forgot. I had a friend who sent me a note. Congratulations. I was like, ooh, what is she talking about? Right.
Yeah.
And it's because the model that we coach around and the place I try to get everybody to that I'm working with is a place where it is so awesome to not drink, right?
Yeah.
You're just not missing drinking. There's no deprivation. You're not relying on willpower. It's just like the obvious choice for you because your life is so amazing without the alcohol. And so when you get to that place where it's so obvious to you that your life is amazing without this thing and you don't have any desire for it anymore, then it also becomes pretty clear to you that you're probably never going to use the substance again. Like, I never say never. I'm not somebody who's promising to never have a drink again. But at the same time, even saying that now sounds stupid because I
totally feel the same.
Inside of me, like, there's zero part of me that thinks that would be a great idea. It's why I can record my 5-year anniversary 8 days before my 5-year anniversary. Cause I'm not like counting the days down. I know, of course I'll be alcohol free in 8 days. Right. Because it just is because it's just so great.
Yeah.
So I think for people who have gone through more of a deprivation based model, listen, I'm not ever on this podcast passing judgment on other models. If people are alcohol free, I'm delighted, however they got there, or substance free. I'm absolutely delighted no matter what the model was that got them there, as long as they feel great about it. Mm-hmm. Right. But when people, I often work with people who are sober, but they are very, very unhappy. In fact, there's someone in my small group program that started this morning who's been sober for a long time, but is still feeling very, very deprived.
Yeah.
And so, the coaching that you and I do, the program, the methodology, This Naked Mind philosophy is all about feeling amazing and not feeling deprived. And once you get there, you like, when you know, right? It's one of those things. So it's a great question, but me too.
The whole thing about just every day not being a struggle, that every day is actually just peaceful, it's just, some people don't know that. And that's why I feel so fortunate that we get to help other women. And I think part of that obviously is definitely like opening up, right? And just like we're doing right now, like sharing our stories. And, we talk a lot about in This Naked Mind about, sharing from our scars, not our wounds. So like over the years, like what have you been able to like open up about more as the years have gone on?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I'm so glad you asked me that, because for people who've been listening to this podcast for the last couple of years, I'm on season 3 now of this podcast. I've been alcohol free the whole time. I was alcohol free for a long time before I started the podcast. I've been sharing, they know that I've been sharing more and more about this over the course of all of these episodes. I just am more comfortable sharing more things. And there are some things that I would never have said out loud 5 years ago. And there are pieces that felt so shameful to me around things that happened when I was drinking, the way I was using alcohol, like so many things that I just would not say out loud to anyone. And many, many of those things now, I mean, almost all of them really are things that I'm really, really comfortable saying. And again, that's because those wounds have healed over. It feels more like a scar now. It's not even like a scar. It's more of like a battle wound.
Yeah.
It's like, it's actually a sign of strength. And I look back on those things and it feels like such an accomplishment that I now have this amazing freedom around this substance that once really was running the show 100% and consumed so much of my thoughts and led to so many negative consequences, right? Again, not major rock bottoms, but just things that were awful. Like one story I've shared a lot lately that I'm not sure I've shared ever on the podcast, but I've been sharing it a lot with groups and with clients, that was something I would not have been comfortable sharing before, is the story of how one time I lost my daughter in New York City. And I was not drunk. But we were on holiday and we'd been to like an Irish pub. We were going to see a show, and my husband was taking my son to see a basketball game in Madison Square Gardens, and I was taking my daughter to see Aladdin. And so we had dinner together and then we separated. And I probably had 3 glasses of wine is my guess. I don't remember exactly, but probably 3 glasses of wine as we sat there we were there for a couple of hours because we were trying to kill time before the show. But we left and my daughter and I were going on our way to Aladdin, and we were standing on the street to cross. And it's very, very busy in the theater district in New York when it's showtime, right? So we came out and she was just at an age where she didn't want to hold my hand anymore. And she'd been really pushing the independence for a long time. And we were, it was irritating as it is when you're a parent, but also was sort of trying to give her that. So she was, we'd had conversations about how she had to stand next to me, stay close to us, all of that stuff. So she's standing next to me and we're waiting for the light to change, and the light changes to cross the street. And I cross the street. And when I get to the other side, she's not there.
Oh my gosh.
And there are like thousands and thousands and thousands.
Oh my gosh.
And I am just so panicked, like in full fight or flight. So I'm looking around for her and I just start screaming her name at the top of my lungs. I'm going up and down the blocks. I'm crossing the street. I'm going up and down the blocks. I can't find her anywhere. And she's wearing this, like, I know she's wearing this really cute little red plaid coat and this red beret, but I can't see her. And, I don't know how long it was, Christy. I mean, it felt like forever, but it was probably more like 3 minutes, right? But it felt like so long. I finally found her, and she was doing exactly what we told her to do if she ever got lost, which was she stood still and she was standing outside of a restaurant. She was crying, and I got to her and, was like, oh, okay, everything's okay. It's okay. We talked her through like what her plan was going to be. If she couldn't find me, what was she going to do? And she had a really good plan for that, and everything was fine. And you think this is the shameful part of the story. The fact that I had 3 glasses of wine and lost my daughter in New York, that's not the shameful part. The shameful part is that I took her to Aladdin. And before we went to our seats, I went to the bar and said to the bartender, just give me the biggest thing of wine you got.
Yeah.
Right. And I got like a big plastic kids Aladdin cup with a straw of white wine and took it to the seats and drank it, during the course of the show. And I was so mortified about that story because it just felt so shameful to me that in that moment, I thought that alcohol was going to help to have more alcohol. Now, would that exact same thing have happened if I hadn't had 3 glasses of wine? There's like probably a 95% chance it would have, right? Like I don't know that it had anything to do with the alcohol, but I also don't know that it didn't. And that was something that for a really long time, I had a great deal of shame around. And then the fact that I ordered a drink when I got to the show, that I felt like I needed a drink to watch a Broadway show with my kid. Like, it was just crazy. But I share that because almost every woman that I know has some story like that. Being with their kids and feeling like they needed a drink to make it better. Or a story of a time when something happened with their kids and they're like, I don't know if that would have happened if I hadn't been drinking. And I have great self-compassion for myself around that now. And thank God everything was okay. I'm very grateful for that. But also that type of experience has allowed me, the gift in that for me when I became alcohol free is that I have focused in on being present with my children for the last 5 years in a way that I had not before. And it has been amazing because my kids were 13 when I stopped drinking. And of course, as you know, and most people listening know, they just left for university. So I had those 5 years with my kids where I wasn't drinking and where I just genuinely felt like I wanted to be with them all the time. And I didn't feel like I needed something else to make it more fun or to make it,
you're making me cry.
Sorry.
It's so true though. It's so true.
Yeah. So it feels vulnerable to share that story about New York, but I've been sharing it more and more with people. My husband didn't even second guess, I called him and we met him afterwards, obviously. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe what happened. I was like terrified and blah, blah. And he wasn't like, well, you were drinking too much. I mean, it just wasn't that kind of a scenario. We're on vacation. I had a few drinks when I was at dinner And this awful thing happened, and it was really scary. And again, just another example, like nobody thought that that was problematic or out of the ordinary or whatever. I don't think there was any connection made with the drinking at that time. I didn't make a connection with the drinking at that time. It wasn't until later when I really started to question drinking, when it really started to get that I look back on things like that and think, oh my God, how embarrassing and how awful that I felt like I needed that drink in that moment to get through that.
Yeah.
When actually everything was okay, thank God. And we were, at a Broadway show together, which should have been like everything. And it wasn't. So anyway, do you have any stories like that? You don't have to share them.
No, but like, I mean, I just took Ella, she's 12, to the Nutcracker last week. And as I was sitting there, I remembered the Nutcracker where I did the same thing, where I went up to the bartender. It was just the two of us, went to the bartender and said, can I have a glass of red wine? He's like, we're only doing half bottle. And he put the whole half bottle in one glass. Mm-hmm. And this was so embarrassing because I had an aisle seat and someone kicked it. And so it was like, it was so obvious that I was like the mom sitting on the side with a half bottle of wine to myself spilled down the side of the aisle. Oh. And it was mortifying. But then of course, this most recent Nutcracker trip, I was like watching everybody around me. Like we were in Royal Albert Hall. We're in one of those little boxes. Yeah. And you see the other moms that are drinking their wine and whatever. That was totally me, but they're distracted and they're distracted by their kids who are chewing too loud and they're getting up. And it's just a totally different thing than actually sitting there and actually listening to the music and enjoying what you're watching.
Yeah. Absolutely. So yeah, that's just one story, but there certainly have been over the years more and more things, because I actually look at my non-drinking status as like, I have a huge amount of pride around the fact that I don't drink. I feel so lucky to be a non-drinker. I say this all the time. Like I'm just so grateful for the fact that I know with incredible clarity and confidence that I do not need alcohol to make anything better, like that it won't make anything better. And the fact that I can go to a party and know with confidence that I'm having as much fun, if not more fun, than all the people who still believe they need the alcohol to have the fun. So that for me is something I just feel so grateful for, that I have that. And I obviously wouldn't have that if I hadn't had all the misery, before it. But great question.
And I loved what you said about you just then kind of pivoted to wanting to spend. That's what made me cry, like as much time as you could with your kids. Cause I feel like that too. Like I just celebrated my 40th birthday and literally all I wanted to do was be with like my quad, my four, and like my husband and my two kids. And that, if you would have told 35-year-old Christy that, I was like planning a trip to Ibiza. I was going to get ridiculous. And it's so, but when you have that like joy of connecting with them, even when they're being irritating, like tween and teens, it's just, it's exactly what you said. It's a blessing. It's rewarding. It's all the things. Yeah. While we're on the kids, tell me about, are they drinking now? And how does that all pan out? How do you talk to them about that? And I want to know this.
Yeah. Well, this is a really tough question. And like, I'm definitely not an expert in parenting for sure.
Who is, babe? Who is?
I'm definitely not an expert around parenting around alcohol either. That's not my area, but I am the parent of two teenagers who are, definitely drinking. I think it's part of their culture, like it was part of our culture. I don't know that it's as strong as it was when I was a kid, the drive to drink. I don't have a solution. I find it challenging, like most parents do, but I will say that parenting your way through it with integrity feels pretty good compared to how I imagine all the time. I'm thinking like, what would it be like to be trying to provide my children with guidance in this area?
Yeah.
If I was still drinking all the time, it would just feel so disingenuous for me. And, what I do is I really believe that the most power we have as happy non-drinkers is to go out and be happy non-drinkers in terms of influencing other people. I think that is far more powerful than telling people. So the whole show, not tell thing, like I go out, my kids see me, I go to everything. I don't turn down invitations to parties or dinners or whatever. I love socializing. We have parties, we have people over, my kids see that. And I just do it all without alcohol. And I have a great time. And I think there's probably incredible role modeling power in that they know it's absolutely possible to be a non-drinker and to have a ton of fun in your life and not miss out on anything. I talk to them about alcohol, of course. I know so much about alcohol, so I do talk to them about that. But I also, I trust my kids. And I think the parenting that I've done in other areas, hopefully will serve them really well when it comes to negotiating their own relationship with alcohol. And then I just make sure that they know that I'm always available to talk about it in a non-judgmental way. And I think that that's probably, for me anyway, as a parent, the best I can do. But if anyone has better ideas, let me know, because it's hard to parent teenagers.
I haven't caught up on your teen spirit episode yet, but it's in my queue. I'm excited for that one.
We didn't talk about drugs and drinking in that one. Well, not much. We talked about vaping a little bit, but not drinking.
Oh my gosh, the vaping thing happened so early. It's already was going around in year, I guess the equivalent of 7th grade, 8th grade in my daughter's school. Yeah. And of course, I said, okay, well, I guess we have to have this conversation. And of course, what did she say? She's like, well, I've seen you vape. I was like, yeah, you know what I did? And then I realized that it was really bad for me and it made me feel gross. And so as soon as like the alcohol stopped, the vaping stopped, and like, ugh.
Yeah, I know. It's definitely easier to talk about it if you're walking the talk. For sure. Yeah. Because it's no longer us versus them. When you have a 19-year-old who's legally able to drink, it's just no longer us versus them. You can't be like, I'm an adult. This is an adult thing. You have to be an adult. Like, they're adults. And now that whole line of parenting that all of us take around things like, well, I can just do this because I'm an adult.
Yeah.
It doesn't fly anymore. And also, that was never correct around alcohol, right? It was never that I could do it because I was an adult. It wasn't bad for me because I was an adult. Like, it was always bad for me. And I was able to make the choice legally because I was an adult. But the truths about alcohol were always there. I just didn't talk to my kids about it because I was drinking. Like, I was drinking, so I didn't talk about it. Anyway, I think, like with everything, you can't get on your soapbox around this and start preaching all of the risks of alcohol and all of that. That just is going to backfire. But I'm doing my best with it.
Yeah. So good. So take me back then again to the beginning and tell me, like, for your listeners that are kind of like early in their journey, like, what are some of the first changes that you noticed when you first stopped drinking?
Well, the first changes that I noticed, a lot of them I was pretty sure I'd noticed. So they were kind of obvious things. Like, I was pretty sure I would feel better. I was pretty sure I would have a little more energy. Funnily enough, like, was not super clear on the fact that the anxiety was connected to the alcohol. And I've heard that from so many other women since who've said the same thing. Like, I stopped drinking and my anxiety basically disappeared. So not just the anxiety I had around alcohol, but the anxiety I seem to have developed around all these other things. I was worried all the time about things like, I mean, Christy, I'd be up in the middle of the night, so terrified I was going to get cancer. It would just keep me awake. We have a history of cancer in my family, and both of my parents had cancer, and, like everyone, cancer's all around. Everybody's, and but I just could not, it was irrational. I couldn't turn my brain off around it. And I never connected that with the drinking. So that happened very, very quickly, but was actually unexpected, which was that, first of all, I wasn't waking up at 3:30 in the morning anymore. Surprise, surprise. So my sleep was better. And then also my anxiety, like across the board, just kind of, I'm not going to say disappeared, but it really, really reduced. And then I guess some of the things that happened right away that I wasn't prepared for, other than that one, I started noticing really early on, I don't know if you did too, but I just started noticing really early on that I was more present for everything in my life. Like, I don't know if it's that I noticed I was more present, or it became clear to me how non-present I had been before. It could be either of those.
Yeah.
Maybe they're the same thing, but I just started really feeling like I was in life in a way that I had been in life for a long time. I was in it for the hard stuff. I was in it for the really great stuff. And again, lots of people listening to this podcast will have heard my gratitude story, and, you know, the piece of my, the timing of the alcohol free period for me was directly connected to the fact that we had just learned in December of 2017 that my dad had a year left to live. So that was all tied into it for me. And so I started also focusing in on gratitude because I had done all kinds of research around it. And I knew the science showed that it was one of, if not the most powerful way to change your perspective and to feel better. And I knew it was going to be a really, really hard year, and that joy was going to feel like outside of my grasp. And I wanted to do this. And I also was really focused on being more present, particularly with my dad. And so maybe that hyper focused me on this whole being present thing. I don't know, but I noticed it right away. And combined with gratitude, it was incredibly powerful to not be drinking and be practicing gratitude in a very focused, directed, and kind of scientific way. So again, if you haven't listened to me talk about gratitude, go listen to that podcast episode, because there's a way to practice gratitude that actually trains your brain to be in the present moment more often, which allows you to see and appreciate all of the little things that are always happening all around you that are amazing and joyful. And when I was drinking, I didn't see those ever.
Yeah.
The glass was half empty all the time.
Oh, yeah. I so relate.
Like those beer goggles are they're really just like a recipe for seeing life without color. And when I stopped drinking, this sounds so flaky, but this is really how I felt. I felt like, oh my God, look what I've been missing out on.
Yeah.
Like, what was I doing? You know, and it that part probably took about a month for me to realize, like, wow, I have been missing all of this because I have been using this substance to numb this, but also thinking about this substance so much that I'm just distracted from whatever's happening in the present moment, you know, just so much mental energy on that. So those are kind of the first things that I noticed. And then there were lots of things that I noticed later, you know, and some of them are still happening. I just posted about this yesterday on Instagram. I got my Kobo summary. They send me an email every month. I never look at it, but this month, for whatever reason, I stopped and I looked at it, and it said that I'd read for, I think it was 29.77 hours in
Oh yeah, I saw that post.
December, right? And 7 books in December. And my immediate thought was, well, yeah, of course you read that much. It was holidays, right? So you had more time to read, but then it also shows you your previous month. And in November, I actually read 30.31 hours. I think it was 31 hours. It was more than the other one. And that is 100% a result of not drinking, because I stopped reading in the years that I was drinking, because of course you go to bed, you've had a few glasses of wine, you're not focusing in on a book, and you're usually just passing out, frankly, at that point. So reading had just kind of disappeared from my life, except for on vacations. And even then I would only read until it was wine o'clock.
Yeah.
And then I would be, you know, but I love reading. Reading. When I was a kid, I would be one of those kids who go to the library, get a huge bag of books and spend the whole weekend just reading. And was an English major, and my dad was an English teacher. And then I just stopped reading. You'll relate, you know, I went to law school. All I read was boring law stuff. And I just was sick of reading, because it felt like all I was doing was reading, but it wasn't any fun. And I had my kids, and then drinking kind of crept in, and it just disappeared from my life. So that's kind of a cool thing. That's 5 years later, I'm realizing, oh, wow, look at this gift, you know, that's come from alcohol. But I think the gifts for me that are the most amazing are the ones that came like a year or two out. And that was this level of confidence and courage. I think I'm now going to call it courage, because I think that might be a better word for it, to actually, first of all, take stock of the things that were missing in my life and get really honest about that. Like, your life is not perfect. It's great. There's lots of great stuff happening for you, but it could be better. And I think the experience with alcohol is what gave me the ability to have that insight, because for a long time, I didn't think my life could be any better. I thought it'd be much worse if I stopped drinking. And then when I stopped drinking, I was like, oh my God, my life is so much better without this substance. That just gave me this hope that in other areas, if I decided it needed to be better, I could do the work and make it better. And so I started doing a lot of work in other areas of my life that I had just been ignoring, or just, ignoring or drinking instead of looking at, I guess. So there was lots of personal growth that happened in other areas of my life. I don't want to go on about it. I've talked about it so many times on this podcast, but I started exploring the creativity piece and the writing, which has come back into my life. It's just been an amazing, amazing bonus of being alcohol free for me. And then on the business side of things, I mean, you know this better than anyone. Finally started doing some stuff in my business that I've been thinking about doing for a really long time, which is starting to basically opening up a school or a training program for new coaches to help them build their businesses. And that is something that I had a lot of that imposter syndrome around, like, why should I do this? Who am I to be teaching coaches how to run a successful business? And then I thought, well, I am a very successful business person, and I've been doing it for a long time. And I actually know an awful lot about how to do this. Yeah, in a way. So, but that took a lot of courage for me to do that and to take a risk and start building that part of my business. And I don't think any of that would have happened if I'd still been drinking. So it's like the gift that keeps on giving, as I said in my last Instagram post.
It's so true.
It is though, right? Like, have you noticed some things since that surprised you?
I feel like everything's a surprise. I mean, I just, even just, I don't know. I've always, I think, wanted to somehow be able to help other women. And I've always wanted to really have this purpose. And I've always really wanted to have like a podcast, and I've always really wanted to write something. And there was never that, I don't know what the word is, like substance or life experience or whatever it is. But like, I think that when you step into this world and you realize, I mean, we both know this, like how great it is. That's all we want to do is shout it from the rooftops. Right. And it's easy. It doesn't feel like work. Yeah. It feels just so rewarding and fulfilling. Yeah. I mean, so many surprises. And circling back to what you said about like one of the beginning ones about anxiety, that is it's so interesting, and women don't know it. And I actually had two clients I was coaching them through Christmas, like the Christmas break, and separately they had data points, and they were both like, oh my gosh, the anxiety. I just don't even want to ever drink again because of that panic. I now know what it is and what it came from. And you're so right, blah, blah, blah. But, and it's just, women don't know that. You don't know that you're dumping gasoline on the fire of your anxiousness. You think you're somehow trying to help it.
Well, because it feels like in the moment it helps. And this is the thing I say all the time about alcohol. It's like, you gotta learn how to play the long game and get out of the short game with it, because in the short term, you can almost always convince yourself there's a benefit to it. Yes. And I just, for years and years and years, just had no idea there even was a long game with it. But it's, that's a really common thing. I hear that a lot too. I have to say, the whole anxiety piece, people bring it back into their lives, try to moderate again, and realize, oh my God, this is actually the worst part of drinking for me, is the anxiety that comes with it.
Yeah. So what's been like because you were like a pioneer. So what's, and since I'm on the newer side, so I'm going to be 3 years in March, like now I'm lucky, right? I've got all the alcohol-free options. I can go to any restaurant and find something, but I don't think it was like that maybe when you kicked off. So tell me more about what's changed.
Oh my God. Well, that's definitely changed. What I think I remember when I first quit, it was in January. So I'm a big football fan, like American football fan. And it would have been like right during playoffs time before the Super Bowl. And I used to cook on Sundays, as some people will know, because I used to post pictures of me cooking on Sundays and watching football, and always had a beer or more than one beer, if I'm being honest. Yeah. So I remember though that first year drinking Beck's, which is not tasty. alcohol-free beer, but it was the only thing I could find. And now, of course, there are just so many options when you go, and so many like amazing for us, amazing local options and craft alcohol-free beer. So, that has definitely changed significantly, the market. But also, like, even today, Christy, I saw something online somewhere about how last January, the statistics are that last January, I think it's 35% of adults in North America, maybe it's just the United States, partook in dry January, which I thought, that's a phenomenally high number of people taking a break from alcohol. There's people who are recognizing this isn't serving me maybe in the way that it once did, or that I'm kind of at a place where I think maybe this is not, in control, or I'm drinking more than I want to be, or I would benefit from this break, which I think is fantastic. I think the biggest thing that I'm seeing is that, and I hope this, I know this will keep going in this direction, which is so wonderful, is that the thing that I wanted to do, I wanted to be a part of, not do by myself, obviously, but I wanted to be a part of normalizing the conversation around not drinking just as a positive choice.
Yeah.
Because I will never fit into the category of a rock bottom drinker. I will never be, I just objectively, there was no one in my life who ever said, do you think you're drinking too much? It never happened. And for a long time, that held me back. I remember getting coaching during the certification program about the fact that I wasn't sure if I should go on Annie Grace's podcast because my drinking wasn't bad enough. And I was alcohol free. I'd been alcohol free for several years at that point. And I think I felt like I don't have a story to tell around this. And what I've realized is I have a really relevant and common story. And it's actually a really good story to share, because the message that I have for other women is you can get off anytime you want. And that is an amazing decision for you if your life feels better without it. Like, that's a great decision to make, whether you have a problem or not. If you want to get off the train, you can get off the train. And the earlier you get off it, the easier it is. It's less problematic. It probably will have less consequences and costs for you. So that has changed in that conversation is happening more and more and more. There's more of a positive conversation happening around the decision to not drink. It is less difficult to announce that you are, not that I go anywhere and announce I'm a non-drinker, but, to share the fact that you don't drink or that you're not going to be drinking tonight. It feels like less of a weird thing than it did 5 years ago. I felt completely alone in this 5 years ago. And I felt so lucky that I found the book, but there was I think a Facebook group, but there wasn't a lot happening. There were no coaches. There was nobody doing, they're not easy for me to find anyway. Anyone that felt like a great fit. And at the time I was like, well, it's AA or nothing. Yeah. And again, I'm not passing judgment or criticizing any other programs, but AA for me was not a great fit. I would never have gone to an AA meeting because I felt like I didn't have a big enough problem, and that I would get there and I'd have to share my story and they'd all be like, what are you doing here? Yeah. And so I think the normalization of that conversation, there's still so much work to do around it, but it is happening. And that is really exciting for me. Yeah. I love that so much. And I love what you said about like more people doing dry January, and also thinking about it in a different way of like, oh, is this still serving me? Because I even remember when I did my first dry January, it literally was solely as punishment for the fact that I had drank so much in December. Totally. Every time I had the totally wrong mindset. Yeah. Yeah. So 100%. What would you say to the listener right now, the woman that is thinking, this seems just still like out of reach or impossible for me? What would you say to her? Yeah, I would say it's not. And the reason I know it's not is because it felt impossible to me for years and years and years and years too. And it felt impossible to Christy, and it felt impossible to every one of the women that Christy and I collectively have supported, who are now feeling amazing. It's not impossible. It doesn't matter how bad it feels to you. It doesn't matter how long you've been trying. Just keep going and you'll get there, and reach out and get some support. Whether it's through a group or, you're doing online meetings or you get a coach. Start by reading The Naked Mind if you haven't read it already. Look into some of the alternative approaches to changing your relationship with alcohol. They may resonate with you more. I would say throw the book at it, try it all. But it is not impossible. It is not impossible at all. And the fact that you are asking yourself whether it's impossible is a great sign, because it means you're still engaged in this. You're still hopeful. You're still trying. That's all that matters.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
So good. Well, congratulations.
You're such a good co-host. I might have to pull you back in for something else. Thank you so much for helping.
Anytime. Well, you're just such an incredible mentor, and I appreciate you so much. So
no, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, guys. So we're going to wrap it up. I'm going to put Christy's information. If you want to learn more about Christy or follow her on Instagram, I'll put that in the show notes to this podcast. And thank you for letting me tell my story. And Christy, thank you for leading me through it.
Of course.
Bye, everyone.
You've been listening to Bite Size Balance with your host, Wendy McCallum. As a certified Naked Mind coach, I help busy women like you find freedom from alcohol. If you're starting to question your relationship with alcohol, you'll want to listen to my free 3-part video series where I address the top 3 myths around why you think you need to drink. Sign up now at www.wendymccallum.com/myths. That's www.wendymccallum.com/myths.